3 gunshots echoed through Black Hollow the night Evelyn Harper sold herself to a stranger. The debt collectors were coming at dawn. Her father was dying. Her siblings would be torn apart and shipped to workhouses across the frontier. She had 12 hours to find a miracle, or watch everything she loved disappear forever. Then a shadow appeared at her door. Tall, silent, offering salvation with one brutal condition. Stay with me until the end to see how a desperate girl from a frozen nowhere town became the most powerful woman in the territory. Drop a like and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The kerosene lamp flickered against the cabin walls, making shadows dance like ghosts preparing for a funeral. Evelyn Harper pressed her palm against the frosted window and stared into the darkness beyond Black Hollow's main street. 3 buildings. 2 families left who'd even look her in the eye. One chance before sunrise. Her father's breathing rattled from the corner bed, wet and heavy. Tuberculosis had carved him hollow over 8 months, turning a man who once hauled timber and broke wild horses into something that barely filled a blanket. Sarah, her 10-year-old sister, slept curled against his side like she could anchor him to this world through sheer stubborn love. Thomas, just 7, was wedged into the gap between the bed and the wall, his thin shoulders rising and falling in the only peace any of them ever found anymore. Evelyn's hands hurt. They always hurt now. Washing other people's laundry in water so cold it felt like knives. Scrubbing floors in the saloon where men barely saw her as human. Mending torn work shirts by candlelight until her vision blurred and her fingers bled through the bandages. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. The numbers lived in her head like a curse she couldn't shake. $47 for the doctor who'd stopped coming. $63 for the mercantile tab her father had run up before he got sick. $85 to the land company that held the deed to their miserable quarter-acre and the shack that shivered on top of it. $195 total. Might as well have been $1 million. She'd tried everything. Begged the pastor who'd given her $2 and a sermon about God's mysterious plans. Asked the mayor for work, any work, and got nothing but a long look that made her stomach turn. Even went to the Carson brothers who ran the lumber operation outside town, but they just laughed and said they didn't hire girls for real work. Real work, she muttered into the frozen glass. Like bleeding yourself dry wasn't real. Like watching your family starve in slow motion wasn't the hardest labor in the world. Tomorrow morning, Clayton Ross and his men would come. The debt collector worked for the land company, and he didn't make social calls. He'd take the deed, the cabin, the mule, their father's rifle, every pot and blanket and stick of furniture they owned. Then he'd separate the children. Evelyn was 23, old enough to fend for herself, legally speaking. Sarah and Thomas would go to the territorial orphanage in Denver or get parceled out to whoever needed cheap labor on their homesteads. She'd heard stories about those places, about what happened to children nobody wanted. The lamp sputtered. She needed to save oil, but the darkness felt too heavy tonight, too final. A sound outside made her freeze. Footsteps. Heavy boots crunching through ice. Evelyn grabbed the fire poker from beside the stove. A pathetic weapon, but the only one she had since her father was too weak to lift his rifle anymore. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Nobody walked through Black Hollow after dark unless they were drunk or looking for trouble. The footsteps stopped at her door. 3 slow knocks, deliberate and patient. "Who's there?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Silence. Then, "Someone who can help." A man's voice, deep, unfamiliar, not slurred drunk, not sharp with threat, just certain. Evelyn tightened her grip on the poker. "We don't need help. Move along. Clayton Ross comes at sunrise. You have $195 in debt. 3 people depending on you. 0 options." Ice flooded her veins. How did he know the exact number? How did he know anything? "I said move. I can clear it. All of it. Your father gets medicine. Your sister and brother stay with you. The land company tears up the deed." A pause. "But everything has a price." Evelyn's hands started shaking. This was insane. Nobody just appeared out of nowhere offering miracles. That wasn't how the world worked, not her world anyway. People like her drowned slowly, while people like him watched. "What do you want?" The words scraped out of her throat. Another pause, longer this time. "Open the door." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse. Strange men in the dark didn't bring salvation. They brought new kinds of hell. She knew that. Every woman on the frontier knew that, but Sarah's face swam up in her mind. Thomas's laugh, the one she hadn't heard in months. Her father's hand squeezing hers yesterday, trying to tell her it was okay to let go, okay to save herself. Evelyn set down the poker and lifted the crossbar. The door swung open on hinges that screamed like dying birds. The man standing in her doorway looked like winter itself had taken human shape. Tall, maybe 6'2" or 6'3", broad through the shoulders in a way that spoke of real labor, not decoration. Dark hair touched with early gray despite a face that couldn't be older than 30. But it was his eyes that stopped her, gray like mountain stone, still like deep water, old in a way that had nothing to do with years. He wore a heavy wool coat that had seen hard use but no poverty. Good boots, good gloves, a pack slung over one shoulder that suggested he'd been traveling. No gun visible, but she'd bet money he was carrying one somewhere. Evelyn Harper. Not a question. That's right. She kept one hand on the doorframe, ready to slam it shut. Who are you? Ryker Vale. He studied her with an intensity that should have felt invasive but somehow didn't. I've been watching Black Hollow for 3 weeks. Watching. Her stomach nodded. Why? Looking for someone. His gaze didn't waver. Someone strong enough to survive what's coming. That was possibly the strangest thing anyone had ever said to her. I don't understand. You will. Ryker shifted his weight, and she caught a glimpse of the street behind him. Empty, frozen, utterly silent. I need a wife. You need money. We can solve both problems tonight. The world tilted sideways. What? Marriage. Legal and binding. In exchange, I pay your debts, set up accounts for your father's medical care, and make sure your family stays together. He said it like he was discussing timber prices. Calm. Transactional. You come with me into the mountains. We build a life. It's that simple. Evelyn stared at him. Tried to find the trap. The angle, the cruel joke underneath. Nobody does that. Men don't offer marriage to strangers out of kindness. I didn't say it was kindness. Something flickered in those stone-gray eyes. I said it was a bargain. What do you get? A wife who understands survival, who won't fold the first time things get hard. Ryker glanced past her into the cabin, taking in the sick man and sleeping children, the bare walls and dying fire. The world I live in doesn't have room for soft people. You're not soft. It should have sounded like a compliment. Instead, it felt like being seen through to the bone. You're insane, Evelyn said flatly. Or dangerous. Probably both. Probably. No denial, no defense. But I'm the only option standing on your doorstep at midnight. He was right. That was the truly horrible part. He was completely right. She could slam the door, refuse the offer, cling to whatever pride she had left. And at sunrise, Clayton Ross would tear her family apart anyway. Why me? She demanded. If you wanted a wife, any girl in town would jump at the chance. Hell, any girl in the territory. You've obviously got money. You could... I don't want someone who jumps. I want someone who fights. Ryker's voice dropped lower. 3 weeks ago, I watched you throw a drunk twice your size out of the saloon. 2 weeks ago, you talked the mercantile owner into extending your credit by explaining exactly how his books would look to territorial auditors if anyone investigated. Last week, you stood in front of Clayton Ross's horse and told him he'd have to trample you to get to your father. Evelyn's breath caught. He really had been watching, cataloging, hunting. That's not fighting, she said quietly. That's just not dying. That's the same thing. Ryker pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. Thick, heavy. $195, cash. You can count it if you want. I'll wait. She didn't take it. And if I say no, then I walk away. You handle tomorrow however you were planning to handle it. He met her eyes. But we both know how that ends. The cabin creaked in a gust of wind. Sarah stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about rabbits. Thomas coughed, that wet, rattling cough that meant his lungs were starting to go bad too. Evelyn looked at the stranger on her doorstep, tried to see past the surface. Was he cruel? He didn't seem cruel. Violent? Maybe, in the way anyone who survived alone had to be. Lying? Her gut said no, which was probably stupid, but her gut was all she had. Where would we go? she asked. Into the mountains, past the logging camps, past where most people travel. What's there? Home. Simple. Certain. More than this. More than this. The words hung in the frozen air like a promise or a threat. I want conditions, Evelyn said. Ryker nodded. Name them. My father gets a real doctor, not the drunk who works out of the saloon. Someone from Denver if you have to. Done. Sarah and Thomas stay together. They don't get split up, not ever. And they get schooling. Done. I want it in writing that if something happens to you, my family's debts stay cleared. They don't inherit your problems. Smart. Ryker almost smiled. Almost. I'll have papers drawn up. Anything else? Yes, 1,000 things. What happened in his mountain home? What kind of life was she stepping into? What did he want from her beyond the label of wife? But she didn't ask any of it, because the only question that mattered was whether she could survive another winter of watching her family disintegrate. If I hate it, she said slowly, if it's wrong, do I get to leave? Ryker studied her for a long moment. Yes, but you won't. The certainty in his voice should have sounded arrogant. Instead, it sounded like plain fact, like stating that winter was cold or mountains were tall. Evelyn took the envelope. It was heavier than she expected. She didn't open it, didn't need to. This man hadn't come here to play games with short cash. He'd come here to buy something specific, and apparently that something was her. When? She asked. Dawn, before Ross arrives. Ryker gestured to her family. Say your goodbyes tonight. Pack light. The mountains don't care about extra weight. Her throat tightened. They'll fight it. My father will. Your father is dying. He knows it. You know it. Brutal honesty delivered without malice. Give him the gift of knowing you and the children survive. That's all he wants now. Evelyn hated that he was right, hated everything about this. But she took the money and nodded. Ryker turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. What? Whatever you hear about me in the next few hours, whatever the town says, remember that you made this choice with clear eyes. His jaw tightened. They'll make me into a monster by morning. Don't let their fear become yours. Then he was gone, boots crunching back down the frozen street, swallowed by darkness. Evelyn stood in the doorway until the cold bit through her dress. Then she went inside, barred the door, and sat down at their rickety table. The envelope sat in front of her like a coiled snake. She opened it, counted. $195 exactly, plus an extra $50. Her hand started shaking so hard she had to put the money down. She pressed her palms flat against the table and tried to breathe through the wave of something that felt too big for her body. Not quite relief. Not quite terror. Some awful hybrid of both. Evie? She spun. Her father was awake, those sunken eyes watching her from the bed. Pa, I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. He shifted, trying to sit up, and she rushed over to help. He weighed nothing. Who was at the door? She should lie, tell him it was nothing, but she'd never been good at lying to him. Someone offering help. Her father's gaze sharpened despite the fever. What kind of help? The kind that keeps Sarah and Thomas together, keeps you in medicine, sends Clayton Ross away empty-handed. Evie. His hand found hers, cold, shaking. What did you promise? Marriage. The word tasted strange, foreign. To a man named Ryker Vale, he's taking me into the mountains tomorrow. Her father went very still. I know that name. Her heart dropped. What? People talk. Even dying men hear things. He coughed, fought it down. Ryker Vale showed up in Black Hollow a month ago, alone, paid cash for supplies, didn't talk to anyone, didn't explain himself. Another cough. Men like that are running from something or hunting for it. He's been watching me, Evelyn admitted. Watching the town. He wants a wife who can survive. I guess I fit the bill. Because you're strong. Pride flickered across her father's wasted face. Too damn strong for your own good sometimes. Not strong enough to fix this without him. No? Honest, painful. No, you're not. Nobody could be. He squeezed her hand. Is he cruel? Did he threaten you? No, he was direct, clear. He's not asking me to love him, just to survive with him. Her father studied her. And you said yes. I said yes. Good girl. His eyes drifted closed. I was so afraid you'd try to carry all of this alone, so afraid you'd break yourself into pieces trying to save us. Pa, listen to me. His grip tightened with surprising strength. You take that chance. You go with him tomorrow. You build something better than this. He gestured weakly at the cabin. And you don't look back. You understand? Don't you dare look back. Evelyn's eyes burned. What about you? I'll be gone before spring. Matter of fact, the way he used to talk about weather. But I'll go easier knowing you're safe. Knowing Sarah and Thomas won't end up God knows where, breaking their backs in some workhouse. Don't. The word broke. Don't talk like that. Someone has to. Her father pulled her down until her forehead rested against his. You've been carrying us for too long, Evie. Let this stranger carry you for a while. See where it goes. She wanted to argue, wanted to promise she'd find another way, a better way, but there was no other way. There never had been. I'm scared, she whispered. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He kissed her forehead. But you're also the toughest person I've ever known. You'll be fine. Evelyn wasn't sure she believed him, but she nodded anyway. The hours before dawn moved like honey. Evelyn sat with her father until he drifted back to sleep, then carefully packed a small canvas bag. 2 dresses, undergarments, her mother's silver locket, the only thing of value they still owned, a journal she'd kept since she was 14, filled with observations and sketches and thoughts she'd never spoken aloud. Everything she was, crammed into a bag that weighed maybe 10 pounds. Sarah woke around 4. Evelyn heard her stir and went to sit on the edge of the bed. Morning, little bird. Sarah yawned, showing the gap where she'd lost a tooth last month. It's still dark. I know. I need to talk to you about something. Her sister sat up, immediately alert. Sarah had always been sharp, too sharp, their father said, like she'd been born reading the world's fine print. What's wrong? Sarah asked. Nothing's wrong, but I'm leaving today. Sarah's face went pale. You can't. Clayton Ross is taken care of. Evelyn showed her the money, counting out enough to cover everything twice over. Someone paid our debts, all of them. Pa's getting a doctor. You and Thomas are staying together. Who did that? A man named Ryker Vale. I'm marrying him. Sarah stared. You're what? It's a bargain. He needs a wife. We need money. It's not a love story, but it's a solution. Evie, you can't marry some stranger. Ugh. I can and I am. Evelyn kept her voice gentle but firm. Because the alternative is watching you disappear into an orphanage, and I'd rather die. Sarah's eyes filled. What if he's awful? What if he hurts you? Then I'll handle it. Evelyn brushed hair out of her sister's face. But I don't think he will. I think he's just alone, like us. Where will you go? Into the mountains. I don't know more than that yet. Will you come back? Evelyn hesitated. I don't know. Sarah threw her arms around her neck and held on like drowning. Evelyn let her, blinking back tears, trying to memorize the weight of her sister's small body and the smell of her hair. You have to be strong, Evelyn whispered. For Thomas, for Pa. Can you do that? I don't want to. I know. But you will anyway. Because you're a Harper and we don't quit. Sarah nodded against her shoulder. They sat like that until gray light started creeping through the window. Then Evelyn gently pulled away and went to wake Thomas. He took it worse. Cried. Begged her not to go. She held him and lied through her teeth, saying everything would be fine. She'd write letters. They'd see each other soon. All the useless promises adults make to children when the truth would crack them open. When full dawn finally broke, Evelyn heard wagon wheels outside. Her stomach dropped. Sarah grabbed her hand. Thomas pressed against her side. Their father watched from the bed, his face unreadable. The knock came. 3 measured beats, just like last night. Evelyn opened the door. Ryker stood there looking exactly the same, steady, certain, unmoved by the life-destroying decision happening on this threshold. Behind him, a sturdy wagon waited, 2 horses, supplies packed neatly under canvas. Ready? He asked. No. Honest. But let's go anyway. Riker's eyes shifted to Sarah and Thomas. The doctor will be here this afternoon. He's already paid for 6 months. After that, there's an account at the mercantile in your father's name. $500. Use it however you need. Sarah's jaw dropped. Thomas just stared. And you? Riker looked at their father. There's a bed waiting in Denver if the mountain air gets too hard on your lungs. I've arranged transport whenever you want it. Evelyn's father studied him. Why? Because she asked me to take care of you. Riker's voice didn't change. And I don't go back on my word. Something passed between the two men, some understanding or judgment that Evelyn couldn't read. Finally, her father nodded. Take care of her. I will. If you don't, you'll haunt me. I know. Riker almost smiled. Fair enough. Evelyn hugged Sarah and Thomas one more time, kissed her father's cheek, grabbed her bag and walked out the door before she could change her mind. The wagon seat was cold. Riker climbed up beside her and took the reins. Wait! Sarah ran out, barefoot in the snow, and thrust something into Evelyn's hands. So you don't forget us. It was a ribbon, blue, faded, the one their mother used to wear in her hair before she died. Evelyn's vision blurred. I could never forget you. I know, but take it anyway. Riker clicked his tongue and the horses started moving. Evelyn watched her family shrink behind them, watched Black Hollow disappear into the gray morning, watched the only life she'd ever known become a memory. She didn't cry, couldn't afford to. Crying was for people who had the luxury of falling apart. You'll see them again, Riker said quietly. How do you know? Because you won't let it be any other way. Evelyn tied the ribbon around her wrist and said nothing. They rode in silence for an hour. The road turned rough, climbing into foothills covered in pine and snow. The temperature dropped. The world got bigger and emptier. Finally, Evelyn spoke. What did you mean last night? About people making you into a monster? Riker's jaw tightened. You'll hear stories. Probably already spreading. Lone wolf stranger rides into town and steals away a desperate girl. Makes me sound like a predator. Are you? No. Flat. Certain. But I don't waste time convincing people who've already made up their minds. What really brought you to Black Hollow? I told you, I was looking for someone. Why me specifically? Riker was quiet for a long time. The wagon creaked. The horse's breath steamed in the cold. Because I watched you fight for something that mattered, he finally said. Most people fight for themselves. You fought for them. That's rare. That's just survival. No. Survival is running. You stood your ground. He glanced at her. I need someone who stands their ground. For what? You'll see. Cryptic bastard. But Evelyn was too tired to push. She pulled her coat tighter and watched the mountains grow. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses. Ryker built a small fire and produced bread and dried meat from his pack. Real food. More than Evelyn had eaten in one sitting in months. She forced herself to eat slowly. Where exactly are we going? Iron Ridge, my land. How far? 3 more days. 3 days. 3 days of not knowing what waited at the end. 3 days with a stranger who saw too much and explained too little. What happens when we get there? She asked. We get married, legal ceremony, then we settle in. And then? Then we build a life. Ryker poked the fire. I work. You learn the land. We figure out how to exist in the same space. That's it. That's your grand plan. What were you expecting? Poetry? Despite everything, Evelyn almost laughed. No, I guess not. I'm not good at pretty words, Ryker said, but I'm good at keeping promises. You'll be safe, provided for, respected. Beyond that, we'll figure it out as we go. What if we can't figure it out, I mean? Then we'll fail honestly instead of pretending. He met her eyes. I don't need you to love me, Evelyn. I need you to survive with me. Everything else is negotiable. It should have sounded cold. Instead, it sounded like the most honest thing anyone had ever said to her. They finished eating and climbed back into the wagon. The mountains swallowed them whole. The second day brought snow. Not the gentle dusting that made Black Hollow look almost pretty in the early mornings, but heavy wet flakes that stuck to everything and turned the world into a smear of white and gray. The wagon wheels churned through mud that froze as fast as it formed. The horses lowered their heads and pushed forward like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Evelyn had never been this far from town. The frontier always seemed enormous when you were trapped in one corner of it, but now, watching the landscape stretch and shift and swallow them whole, she understood how small her entire life had been. Black Hollow wasn't the world. It was barely a pinprick on the edge of something vast and indifferent. Ryker hadn't spoken in hours. He sat beside her like a piece of the mountain itself, hands steady on the reins, eyes scanning the tree line. Not nervous, just aware, like he expected the wilderness to test them and wanted to be ready when it did. "How often do you make this trip?" Evelyn asked, mostly to break the silence. "Once a month, sometimes twice if I need supplies." "And you always go alone?" "Yes." "Why?" Ryker glanced at her. "You ask a lot of questions. You're not exactly volunteering information." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "Fair enough. I go alone because I don't trust easily, and most people aren't built for this kind of travel. But I am." "We'll find out." The snow got heavier. Ryker pulled the wagon under a stand of massive pines and started setting up camp with the kind of efficiency that spoke of years doing this exact thing. He had a small canvas shelter rigged in minutes, a fire going seconds later. The horses were unhitched, rubbed down, and fed before Evelyn even finished stomping, feeling back into her feet. She watched him work. There was something almost hypnotic about it, the way he moved through tasks without hesitation or wasted motion. No fumbling, no second guessing, just quiet competence that made her feel useless, standing there doing nothing. "Can I help?" she asked. "Can you start coffee?" "Yes." "Pot's in the left pack. Water's in the barrel on the wagon. Grounds are in the tin with the blue label." Evelyn found everything exactly where he said it would be. She filled the pot, measured out coffee that smelled better than anything she'd had in months, and set it over the fire. Her hands knew the work even if the equipment was nicer than what she was used to. Ryker produced 2 tin cups and a package wrapped in waxed paper. Inside were thick slices of bread, cheese, and some kind of dried sausage that tasted like pepper and smoke. They ate without talking. The fire crackled. Snow hissed against hot stones. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long and lonely and so close it made Evelyn's skin prickle. "Wolves come near the camp?" she asked. "Sometimes. They won't bother us if we don't bother them." "And if they do?" Ryker pulled back his coat just enough to show the revolver strapped to his hip. "Then I bother them back." Evelyn sipped her coffee and tried not to think about how far they were from anything resembling help. If something went wrong out here, if Ryker turned out to be exactly what Black Hollow would be whispering about by now, there was nowhere to run, no one to hear her scream. But he'd had a dozen chances to hurt her already, and all he'd done was feed her and keep her warm. "You're scared," Ryker said quietly. Not a question, an observation. "Little bit," Evelyn admitted. "Of me or the situation?" "Both." "Good. You'd be stupid not to be." He refilled his cup. "But for what it's worth, I meant what I said. You're safe with me." "Why should I believe you?" "Because if I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have spent 3 weeks planning how to take care of your family first." He met her eyes over the fire. "Cruelty is efficient, Evelyn. It doesn't waste time on doctors and mercantile accounts." The logic was sound, but logic didn't stop fear from crawling up her spine every time darkness pressed too close. "Tell me about Iron Ridge," she said, changing the subject. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Everything. You're dragging me to the middle of nowhere. I'd like to know what I'm walking into." Ryker considered that. "It's big. Bigger than Black Hollow. Self-sufficient. We've got timber operations, livestock, a mill. About 30 people work the land year-round, maybe 50 during harvest season." Evelyn's eyebrows shot up. 30 people? That's not a homestead, that's a town. It's an estate. And you run it alone? "I have a foreman, good man named Marcus. He handles day-to-day operations when I'm gone." Ryker poked the fire. "But yes, it's mine." Something didn't add up. Men who owned estates didn't wander into dying frontier towns looking for wives among the desperate and poor. They married within their class, daughters of other landowners, women who came with dowries and connections. Why didn't you just marry someone from your world? Evelyn asked bluntly. Someone who already knew how to run a big house? Someone whose family could benefit your business? Ryker's jaw tightened. Because everyone from my world wants something. Land, money, status. They see the estate first and me second. He looked at her. You didn't even know I had money when you said yes. You just wanted to save your family. That's honest. It's not noble. I still sold myself. You made a trade. There's a difference. He stood, brushing snow off his coat. Get some sleep. We've got another long day tomorrow. He checked the horses one more time while Evelyn crawled into the canvas shelter. It was barely big enough for two people, lined with wool blankets that smelled like pine and smoke. She curled up on one side, trying to take up as little space as possible. Ryker came in a few minutes later. He lay down on the opposite side, a careful 2 feet of space between them. If you get cold, say something, he said into the darkness. Freezing to death because you were too polite to ask for another blanket is a stupid way to die. Despite everything, Evelyn almost smiled. Noted. She expected to lie awake all night, hyper-aware of the stranger beside her. But exhaustion dragged her down faster than fear could hold her up, and she fell asleep to the sound of wind in the pines. She woke once in the dead hours before dawn. The fire had died to embers. The cold had teeth. She was shivering hard enough to hurt. Without a word, Ryker shifted closer and draped another blanket over both of them. Not touching her, just sharing warmth. Thank you, Evelyn whispered. Go back to sleep. She did. The third day was harder. The terrain got steep. The wagon struggled over rocks and frozen streams. Twice they had to stop and clear fallen branches from the path. Evelyn's hands went numb despite her gloves. Her face felt like raw meat. Every bump sent shocks of pain through her tailbone. But she didn't complain. Wouldn't give Ryker the satisfaction of being right about soft people not surviving. Around noon, they crested a ridge and the world opened up. Valley after valley rolled out below them, covered in forest so thick it looked black from a distance. Mountains stood like sentinels on every horizon. A frozen river cut through the center, winding south toward territory Evelyn had only heard about in stories. That's the western edge of my land, Ryker said, pointing to a line of cliffs. Runs about 15 miles north to south, 10 miles east to west. Evelyn stared. You own 15 miles of this? Give or take. How? Bought it, paid claim fees, fought off squatters and timber poachers until everyone got the message. He clicked his tongue and the horses started down the slope. Took 5 years to make it stick. 5 years. Evelyn tried to imagine spending 5 years carving an empire out of wilderness and couldn't quite wrap her mind around it. That kind of work required vision she'd never had the luxury of developing. Her whole life had been about surviving the next week, the next day, the next hour. What made you want this? She asked. Ryker didn't answer right away. The wagon creaked. The horses snorted. I got tired of being owned, he finally said. Owned? By expectations, by people who thought they knew what I should do with my life. His voice went flat. So I left. Found a place where nobody could tell me who to be. There was a story there. A big one. But Evelyn could tell from the set of his shoulders that he wasn't ready to share it. They descended into the valley as afternoon light turned everything gold and blue. The temperature dropped further. Evelyn's breath came out in clouds. Just when she thought she couldn't sit in the wagon for another minute without screaming, Ryker pulled the horses to a stop. We're here. Evelyn looked around. Trees, rocks, more trees. Where? Look closer. She followed his gaze and her breath caught. What she'd thought was a natural rock formation was actually a wall. Massive timber posts sunk deep into stone, fitted together so precisely they looked like they'd grown there. The walls stretched 30 feet in either direction before disappearing into the forest. And beyond it, barely visible through the trees, were buildings. Ryker drove the wagon toward an iron gate that looked like it could stop a charging bear. He pulled a key from his coat, actual iron, heavy and old, and unlocked it. The gate swung open without a sound. They rolled through into another world. The main house rose out of the forest like something from a fever dream. 3 stories of dark timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and tall windows that caught the dying light. Smoke curled from 2 chimneys. Lamplight glowed behind curtains. But it wasn't just the house. There were outbuildings. A barn that could have held 20 horses, a workshop with neat stacks of lumber beside it, a smokehouse, a root cellar built into the hillside. Everything maintained, everything deliberate. And people. A man came out of the barn, saw the wagon, and started jogging toward them. A woman appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. Two more figures emerged from the workshop. They all stopped when they saw Evelyn. Ryker brought the wagon to a halt in front of the main house and climbed down. He reached up to help Evelyn, and she took his hand because her legs had gone numb, and she didn't trust them. The man from the barn arrived first. 40-something, built like a blacksmith, with a beard going gray, and eyes that assessed Evelyn in one quick sweep. "Boss," he said to Ryker, then more carefully, "Ma'am." "Marcus, this is Evelyn Harper." Ryker kept his hand on her elbow, steadying her. "My wife." The silence that followed could have crushed bones. Marcus's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. The woman on the porch actually gasped. The two from the workshop just froze. "You're what now?" Marcus said. "You heard me?" "I definitely heard you. I'm just not sure I believe you." Marcus looked at Evelyn again, this time with open curiosity instead of suspicion. "Ma'am, did he kidnap you? Blink twice if you need help." Despite the cold and exhaustion and complete disorientation, Evelyn almost laughed. "No kidnapping, just poor life choices." Marcus's face split into a grin. "Well, at least she's honest. That's more than we usually get around here." He stuck out his hand. "Marcus Webb, foreman, also unofficial keeper of sanity in this madhouse." Evelyn shook it. His grip was firm but not crushing. "Evelyn, apparently the new lady of the madhouse." "Apparently." Marcus shot Ryker a look that promised a very long conversation later. "You know Victoria's going to lose her mind when she finds out." "Victoria can shove her opinions where the sun doesn't shine," Ryker said flatly. "Who's Victoria?" Evelyn asked. "My aunt. She lives in Denver, runs the business side of the timber operations." Ryker grabbed Evelyn's bag from the wagon. "And she's going to hate you on principle, so don't take it personally." "Wonderful. Can't wait to meet her." The woman from the porch came down the steps. She was older than Evelyn by maybe 10 years, with dark hair pinned up and an expression that tried for welcoming but couldn't quite hide the shock. "Mr. Blackwood, call me Ryker, Helen. You know I hate the formal stuff." Helen nodded. "Ryker, should I prepare the guest room or—" "The main bedroom," Ryker said. "We'll be sharing." Evelyn's stomach flipped. They hadn't discussed sleeping arrangements, hadn't discussed a lot of things, apparently. Helen's eyes went wide, but she recovered quickly. "Of course. I'll get fresh linens on the bed and make sure the fire's going. Would you like supper brought up, or will you be eating in the dining room?" "Dining room, 1 hour." Ryker turned to Evelyn. "That give you enough time to wash up and change?" "Into what? I have 2 dresses. There's a wardrobe in the bedroom. Find something that fits." Before Evelyn could ask whose wardrobe he was talking about, Ryker was already heading into the house, carrying her bag like it weighed nothing. She looked at Marcus, who shrugged. "Welcome to Iron Ridge, ma'am. It's never boring, I'll give it that." Helen gestured toward the door. "Come on, I'll show you where everything is, and maybe explain what you've gotten yourself into." Evelyn followed her inside and nearly tripped over her own feet. The entryway was bigger than her entire cabin in Black Hollow. Dark wood floors polished to a shine. A staircase that curved up to the second floor. Actual paintings on the walls. Landscapes and portraits of stern-looking people who were probably Ryker's ancestors, or something equally intimidating. And warmth. Real warmth from a fireplace you could roast a whole pig in. "This is insane," Evelyn breathed. "Wait until you see the rest of it." Helen led her up the stairs, down a hallway lined with more paintings and closed doors. "How much did he tell you about this place?" "Not much. He's not exactly chatty." "No, he's not." Helen stopped in front of a door at the end of the hall and pushed it open. "Well, here's your room. Our room, I suppose I should say now." Evelyn stepped inside, and her brain tried to process what she was seeing. The bedroom was massive. A 4-poster bed that could sleep 5 people dominated one wall. A fireplace crackled on another. 2 armchairs sat near the window, a small table between them. And along the far wall, a wardrobe that looked like it had been carved by someone who took pride in their work. "This is where Ryker sleeps?" Evelyn asked. "When he's here, yes." Helen moved to the fireplace and added another log. though he's gone more often than not. The man doesn't know how to sit still. Evelyn walked to the wardrobe and opened it. Inside hung at least a dozen dresses in various colors and styles. All expensive, all well-made, all completely wrong for someone who'd spent her life in homespun and hand-me-downs. "Whose are these?" she asked. Helen hesitated. They were meant for Ryker's previous fiancé. But that arrangement fell through about a year ago, and he never got rid of them, figured he'd need them eventually. Previous fiancé. Of course, men like Ryker didn't reach 30 without someone trying to lock them down. "What happened?" Evelyn asked. "With the fiancé?" She met the estate, decided it was too rustic, and went back to Denver. Helen's tone suggested she'd had opinions about that. "Between you and me, she was a spoiled thing who wouldn't have lasted a week up here. You've got a better spine already." "You don't know that. You've known me for 5 minutes. I know you made it 3 days in a wagon through mountain winter without complaining. That's more than most manage." Helen gestured to the wardrobe. "Find something comfortable. I'll have hot water sent up for washing." She left, closing the door behind her. Evelyn stood in the middle of the enormous bedroom and tried to remember how to breathe. This was her life now. This house, this room, this stranger's bed. She'd made her choice. Now she had to survive it. The hot water arrived in a copper basin carried by a girl who couldn't have been more than 16. She set it down on a stand near the window, along with soap that smelled like lavender and towels softer than anything Evelyn had ever touched. "I'm Ruth," the girl said shyly. "I help Helen with the house. If you need anything, just ring the bell by the bed." "Thank you, Ruth." The girl hesitated. "Is it true? That you married Mr. Blackwood?" "Apparently. That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard." Ruth's eyes went dreamy. "He rode into town and swept you away like a knight in a story." Evelyn almost laughed. "Romantic? Sure, if you ignored the part where she'd sold herself to avoid watching her family starve." But Ruth looked so hopeful that Evelyn just smiled and said, "Something like that." After Ruth left, Evelyn stripped down and washed with the hot water and lavender soap. It felt like peeling away a layer of grime she'd been carrying for months. She scrubbed until her skin turned pink, then dried off and faced the wardrobe again. The dresses were beautiful. Impractical as hell, but beautiful. She chose the simplest one, dark green wool with minimal decoration. It fit well enough, though it was a little loose through the waist. The previous fiancé must have been taller and curvier. Evelyn braided her damp hair, tied it with the blue ribbon Sarah had given her, and stared at herself in the mirror above the washstand. She looked like someone playing dress-up, a farm girl in a rich woman's clothes. This was never going to work. A knock at the door made her jump. "It's me," Ryker said from the hall. Evelyn opened the door. He'd changed too, cleaner shirt, hair damp like he'd washed. He looked her over once, quick and assessing. "It fits. Mostly. Good enough." He gestured toward the stairs. "Ready?" "Not even a little bit. Come anyway." The dining room was smaller than she expected, but still twice the size of her old cabin. A long table sat in the center, already set with actual china and silverware that matched. Candles burned in holders that looked like they cost more than her father's medical bills. Marcus was already seated, along with Helen and 2 other men Evelyn didn't recognize. They all stood when she entered. "Evelyn, this is James and Cooper," Ryker said, nodding to the men. "They run the lumber operations. James handles the mill. Cooper manages the cutting crews." James was younger, maybe 25, with dark skin and careful eyes. Cooper was older and weathered, with hands like tree roots and a face that suggested he didn't smile often. "Ma'am," they both said. "Just Evelyn is fine." "Not if you're the boss's wife," Cooper said. "That makes you the lady of the house. Protocol matters." Evelyn looked at Ryker, who just shrugged. "They're not wrong. I don't know how to be the lady of anything." "Then learn," Marcus said cheerfully. "We'll help." They sat. Helen brought out food, roasted venison, potatoes, bread that was still warm, vegetables that must have come from a root cellar because nothing was growing this time of year. More food than Evelyn had seen in one place in months. She ate slowly, trying not to look like she was starving even though she absolutely was. The men talked business around her, timber yields, equipment repairs, a problem with poachers on the northern boundary. Evelyn listened and tried to piece together what she'd walked into. This wasn't just a homestead. It was an operation. A small empire running on coordination and careful planning, and somehow she was supposed to fit into it. So, Marcus said, eventually, fixing Ryker with a look. You want to tell us how this happened? Last time you went to town, you were going for nails and coffee. You came back with a wife. Things changed. That's not an explanation. It's all you're getting tonight. Ryker's tone left no room for argument. Evelyn's here. She's staying. That's what matters. Cooper frowned. What about Miss Victoria? She's not going to... Ush. Victoria doesn't make decisions for this estate. I do. Ryker's voice went cold. And I've made mine. An uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Evelyn set down her fork. Who is Victoria exactly? And why does everyone keep acting like she's going to be a problem? She's Ryker's aunt, Marcus said. Also the primary investor in the timber operations. She owns about 40% of the business. And she's been trying to marry Ryker off to someone from Denver for years, James added. Someone who'd strengthen the company's connections. Someone suitable, Helen said quietly. Suitable. The word hit like a slap. Evelyn looked at Ryker. And I'm not suitable. You're exactly what I need, Ryker said. Victoria's opinion is irrelevant. Is it? Cooper leaned forward. Because last time you two fought about this, she threatened to pull her investment and collapse the whole operation. She won't. You don't know that. I do. Ryker's jaw set. Because if she pulls out, I'll buy her shares myself. I've been setting aside capital for 3 years. She makes a move, I cut her loose. Marcus whistled low. You've been planning this. I've been planning for the day I could tell her to shove it. Yes. Evelyn's head spun. So you brought me here knowing it would cause problems, knowing your aunt would hate it. Yes. Why? Because I'm tired of living my life according to other people's requirements. Ryker met her eyes. And because you don't care about the money, or the estate, or any of it. You just wanted to save your family. That's the only honest motivation I've seen in years. It should have felt like a compliment. Instead, it felt like being a piece in a game she didn't understand. I'm going to bed, Evelyn said abruptly, standing. Thank you for dinner. She left before anyone could respond, climbed the stairs, and shut herself in the massive bedroom that still didn't feel real. She paced, tried to think. Couldn't. This was so much bigger than she'd understood. Ryker hadn't just married her. He'd used her as ammunition in some family war she hadn't even known existed. The door opened. Ryker stepped inside and closed it behind him. You're angry, he said. I'm a lot of things right now. Fair. You should have told me about your aunt, about the business, about what bringing me here would mean. Would it have changed your answer? Evelyn wanted to say yes, but they both knew the truth. She'd have said yes anyway because her family's survival mattered more than pride or dignity or anything else. No, she admitted, but I still deserve to know. You're right. Ryker moved to the fireplace and stared into the flames. I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to factor into your decision. I wanted you to choose based on what I offered, not on what problems came with it. That's not how honesty works. I know. He turned to face her. I'm not good at this, at explaining myself, at letting people in. I've spent too long keeping everyone at arm's length. Why? Because people want things from me. They always have. My aunt wants control. The investors want profit. The women she tried to set me up with wanted status. His voice roughened. You're the first person who looked at me and just saw a way out. Not a prize, not a mark, just a solution to a problem. That doesn't make it better. I know that too. Ryker ran a hand through his hair. Look, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to be bad at parts of this. But I meant what I said. You're safe here, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you that way, even if it means going to war with my own family. Evelyn studied him, tried to see past the hard exterior to whatever was underneath. I need you to be honest with me, she finally said, about everything. No more surprises. I can do that. And I need space. Time to figure out how I fit into this place. Done. And I'm sleeping in that chair tonight. She pointed to one of the armchairs by the window. I need to process all of this, and I can't do that lying next to you. Something flickered in Ryker's eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or understanding. The bed's big enough for both of us without touching, but if you want the chair, take it. He grabbed blankets from a chest at the foot of the bed and handed them to her. Then he stripped down to his undershirt and pants, climbed into bed, and turned to face the wall. "Good night, Evelyn." "Good night." She curled up in the chair with the blankets and watched the fire burn low. Outside, wind howled through the mountains. Inside, a stranger slept in a bed that was supposed to be theirs, and Evelyn sat in the darkness, wondering if she'd traded one kind of survival for another. Evelyn woke with her neck screaming and every muscle in her body staging a rebellion. The chair had looked comfortable last night. Turned out it was built for sitting, not sleeping, and her spine had spent 8 hours reminding her of that fact. Gray dawn light filtered through the windows. The fire had died to ash. Ryker's side of the bed was empty, blankets pulled tight like he'd never been there at all. She unfolded herself from the chair and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her lower back. Her left shoulder felt like someone had driven a nail through it. "Stubborn idiot," she muttered to herself. A soft knock interrupted her attempt to stretch feeling back into her limbs. "Come in." Helen entered carrying a tray with coffee and what looked like fresh bread. "Morning. Thought you might want breakfast before facing the day." "You're a saint." Evelyn took the coffee and drank it black, not caring that it burned her tongue. The warmth helped. Helen set the tray on the small table between the chairs and studied Evelyn with the kind of look that saw too much. "Rough night? Is it that obvious? You slept in a chair instead of a bed the size of a small house, so yes." Helen poured her own cup and sat. "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Fair enough." Helen bit into a piece of bread. "But for what it's worth, Ryker's not a bad man. Just a complicated one." "Complicated is one word for it." "He didn't tell you everything, did he?" Evelyn shook her head. "About his aunt, about what bringing me here would mean. I thought I was just solving a problem. Turns out I'm ammunition in some family war." "That sounds about right," Helen sighed. "Victoria Blackwood is a piece of work, sharp as a knife and twice as cold. She built half this timber empire with her own hands after her husband died, and she's not about to let anyone threaten it. Even her own nephew? Especially her nephew. She sees Ryker as an asset to manage, not a person with his own life." Helen's voice went hard. "She's been trying to marry him off to Caroline Fletcher for 3 years. Caroline's father owns railroads. The alliance would have been worth millions." Evelyn's stomach sank. "And I ruined that." "No. Ryker ruined that when he told Caroline and her father exactly where they could shove their business proposal." A small smile crossed Helen's face. It was spectacular. Made the Denver papers and everything. "When did this happen?" "About a year ago. Same time that wardrobe full of dresses showed up." Helen gestured toward it. "Those weren't for a fiancé. They were Victoria's attempt to make Ryker presentable for Caroline. He refused to wear any of it, so Victoria had them sent here anyway. Said he'd need them eventually for whoever he married." Evelyn looked at the wardrobe with new understanding. She was that sure he'd fall in line. She's used to getting her way. People don't usually tell Victoria Blackwood no. Ryker seems pretty good at it. He's had practice. Helen stood. "Come on. Get dressed in something you can work in. I'll show you around the estate before the vultures descend." "Vultures?" "Victoria. She'll be here within the week once word reaches Denver. And trust me, you want to understand this place before she arrives." Evelyn changed into the simplest dress she could find and followed Helen downstairs. The house looked different in daylight, still massive, still intimidating, but more lived in than she'd noticed last night. Scuff marks on the floors, books piled on tables, a coat thrown over a chair like someone had been in a hurry. Outside, the estate stretched in every direction. Helen walked fast, pointing out buildings and rattling off information like she'd given this tour 100 times. The barn housed 20 horses, including the 2 that had pulled the wagon. The workshop produced everything from furniture to wagon repairs. The smokehouse was full of venison and pork. The root cellar could feed the entire operation through 2 winters if necessary. "How many people live here?" Evelyn asked. 32 right now. Closer to 50 during timber season." Helen led her past a row of small cabins. "These are for the workers. Ryker built them 5 years ago. Before that, everyone was crammed into a bunkhouse that wasn't fit for animals. He treats them well? Better than most. Fair wages, decent housing, medical care when they need it." Helen's voice softened. He's not perfect, but he's not a bastard either. He actually gives a damn about the people who work for him. They walked to the edge of a clearing where the forest opened up to show the valley beyond. From here, Evelyn could see the scope of the operation. Logging roads cutting through trees, cleared areas where timber had been harvested, new growth pushing up through snow. It's huge, she breathed, and barely scratches the surface of what Ryker owns. Helen crossed her arms against the cold. Victoria wants to expand. Clear more forest, process more lumber, make more money. Ryker's been fighting her on it for 2 years. Why? Because he understands you can't just strip the land bare and expect it to keep giving. You have to be smart, selective, sustainable. Helen glanced at her. That's another reason Victoria hates the idea of him choosing his own wife. She wanted someone who'd push him toward profit instead of conservation. And she thinks I'll do what exactly? I don't know anything about timber. She thinks you're poor and desperate and easy to control. Helen's voice went sharp. She's wrong on all counts, but she won't figure that out until she tries. A figure emerged from the tree line, Ryker, carrying an axe and looking like he'd been working for hours. His shirt was damp with sweat despite the cold. Wood chips clung to his pants. He saw them and changed direction, closing the distance in long strides. "Morning," he said to Evelyn, then to Helen. "Thanks for showing her around. Someone had to. You were busy doing whatever it is you do at dawn." Helen gave him a pointed look. "We need to talk about Victoria." "Later." Ryker's jaw set. "I've got work." "Ryker?" "Later, Helen." Helen threw up her hands and walked back toward the house, muttering something about stubborn men and their death wishes. Ryker watched her go, then turned to Evelyn. "How's your neck?" "What?" "You slept in a chair. Your neck has to be killing you." Evelyn hated that he was right. "It's fine." "You're a terrible liar." He shifted the axe to his other hand. "Look, about last night, you don't have to apologize again." "I wasn't going to. I was going to say you're welcome to sleep wherever you want. Chair, bed, different room entirely. Your choice." It should have felt like a concession. Instead, it felt like distance, and Evelyn wasn't sure how she felt about that. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, changing the subject. "Clearing deadfall. Winter storms knock down trees, and they're a fire hazard if we don't clean them up." "By yourself?" "I like the work. Keeps me from thinking too much." Ryker studied her. "You want to help?" Evelyn blinked. "Help you chop wood?" "Why not? You've got working hands. Might as well use them." It was possibly the strangest invitation she'd ever received, but standing around feeling useless sounded worse than manual labor, so she nodded. Ryker led her to a section of forest where a massive pine had come down in some recent storm. The trunk was easily 3 feet across. Branches jutted out like broken bones. "We're cutting it into sections," Ryker explained, handing her a smaller axe. "You take the branches, I'll handle the trunk." They worked in silence. The rhythm felt familiar. Swing, strike, adjust, swing again. Evelyn's hands remembered this kind of labor, even if her body protested. Sweat soaked through her dress despite the cold. Her shoulders burned. But it felt good. Real. Like she was contributing something instead of just existing in a space too big for her. "You're good at this," Ryker said after an hour. "I've chopped plenty of wood, just never this much at once." "Most women from town won't touch an axe. Most women from town haven't had to keep a fire going through winter or starve." Evelyn wiped sweat from her forehead. "Money makes you soft. Poverty keeps you sharp." "That's the truth." Ryker swung his axe, and a section of trunk split clean. "It's also why I wanted someone like you instead of someone like Caroline Fletcher." "Helen told me about her." "Did she tell you Caroline cried when she saw this place? Said it was barbaric and uncivilized." Ryker's voice dripped contempt. "She lasted 4 hours before demanding to be taken back to Denver." 4 hours? "She saw a bear, lost her mind, started screaming about how I was trying to kill her by bringing her to the wilderness." He shook his head. "I told Victoria right then I was done with her matchmaking." Evelyn couldn't help it. She laughed. Actually laughed, and it felt strange and good at the same time. "What's funny?" Ryker asked. "Just picturing some society woman losing it over a bear. We had bears wander through Black Hollow all the time. You just don't bother them, and they don't bother you." "Exactly. Something like approval flickered in Ryker's eyes. You get it. Most people don't. They worked until noon, when Marcus showed up with lunch. Bread, cheese, and cold meat wrapped in cloth. Boss, you've got visitors, Marcus said. Ryker went still. Who? 3 men from Denver. Say they're investors with Victoria. Want to discuss expansion plans. Tell them I'm busy. I did. They're waiting anyway. Marcus looked uncomfortable. One of them is Richard Dalton. Ryker's expression went dark. Of course he is. Who's Richard Dalton? Evelyn asked. Victoria's lawyer, also the most insufferable bastard in the territory. Ryker grabbed his coat from where he'd hung it on a branch. This isn't a social call. They're here to pressure me about the expansion. What expansion? The one I've been blocking for 2 years. Ryker started walking back toward the house. Victoria wants to clear the northern forest, 10,000 acres. It would triple our output and destroy half the watershed. Evelyn hurried to keep up. And you said no. I said hell no. The rivers feed into 3 valleys. You strip that forest, you cause landslides, flooding, and kill the ecosystem for 100 miles. His voice went hard. But Victoria doesn't care about any of that. She cares about profit margins. They reached the house to find 3 men on the porch, looking decidedly out of place in their city suits and polished shoes. The one in the middle was tall and thin, with the kind of face that probably smiled while foreclosing on widows. Mr. Blackwood, he said smoothly, so good to see you again. Dalton. Ryker didn't offer his hand. You're trespassing. Hardly. We're here on business. Dalton's eyes slid to Evelyn. And you are? None of your concern, Ryker said before Evelyn could answer. Actually, I think she is. Word reached Denver that you've taken a wife. Dalton's smile sharpened. Miss Victoria was quite surprised, as were we all. My personal life isn't Victoria's business. When it affects the company, it absolutely is. One of the other men stepped forward, shorter, stocky, with cold eyes. I'm Bernard Hayes. I hold 20% of the timber operation, and I have concerns about leadership decisions being made without consulting the board. There is no board. This is my land, my operation. Ryker's voice could have cut glass. Victoria has investment stake. That doesn't give her control. Actually, it does give us leverage. Dalton pulled papers from his coat. We've been reviewing the contracts. If leadership is deemed unstable or making decisions detrimental to profit, investors have the right to call a vote of no confidence. Evelyn's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a social call. This was an attack. You're bluffing, Ryker said. Am I? Dalton smiled. Your aunt is concerned that your recent marriage choices indicate poor judgment, that you're prioritizing personal whims over business necessity. My marriage has nothing to do with business, doesn't it? You could have married Caroline Fletcher. The Railroad Alliance alone would have been worth millions in shipping contracts. Instead, you married... Dalton looked Evelyn up and down like she was livestock. Well, someone substantially less advantageous. Heat flooded Evelyn's face, not embarrassment, rage. Be very careful how you finish that sentence, Ryker said quietly. I'm simply stating facts. Miss Victoria has legitimate concerns about your leadership, as do we. Dalton gestured to the other investors. We're here to discuss the northern expansion. If you continue blocking it, we'll have no choice but to pursue other options. Like what? A vote of no confidence? Ryker laughed, short and bitter. Good luck with that. I own 51% of this operation. You can vote all you want. I'll outvote you every time. Bernard Hayes shifted. There are other ways to apply pressure. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. Hayes's voice went cold. You want to play the noble conservationist? Fine. But we're not obligated to keep investing in an operation that refuses to maximize profit. We can pull our capital, see how long you last without it. The third man, who hadn't spoken yet, finally stepped forward. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a face that suggested he'd seen too much. Gentlemen, perhaps we could discuss this inside? Over coffee? No. Ryker's tone left no room for negotiation. You can discuss it on your way back to Denver. You're not welcome here. Mr. Blackwood, get off my land, now. Dalton's smile never wavered. We'll be in touch. And when Miss Victoria arrives next week, I suggest you reconsider your position. Tell Victoria she's welcome to visit, but if she brings you 3 again, I'll have you thrown off the property." Ryker stepped closer. "And that's not a threat. It's a promise." The investors exchanged glances. Then Dalton tucked the papers back into his coat and nodded. "We'll be going, but this conversation isn't over." They left, climbing into a fancy carriage that looked ridiculous on the rough mountain road. Evelyn watched them disappear, her heart still racing. "That was fun," Marcus said dryly from the doorway. "Shut up." Ryker ran a hand through his hair. How did they even know to come here? Probably the same way everyone knows everything. Someone talked. Marcus crossed his arms. "What are you going to do when Victoria shows up?" "Deal with her, same as always." "Ryker, they're serious. They'll push for that vote. Let them try. I've got the controlling stake. They can't force me out. They can make your life hell, though." Marcus glanced at Evelyn. "And hers." Evelyn had been quiet through the whole exchange, but now she stepped forward. "Why does your aunt hate the idea of conservation so much? Doesn't she understand that stripping the forest will kill the land?" "She understands. She doesn't care." Ryker's voice went flat. "Victoria grew up poor, clawed her way up through nothing. To her, profit is survival. Everything else is sentiment. And she thinks you're being sentimental by protecting the forest. She thinks I'm being weak." Evelyn thought about that. About survival versus sustainability. About short-term gain versus long-term planning. "She's wrong," Evelyn said. Ryker looked at her. "What?" "She's wrong. Protecting the land isn't weak. It's smart." Evelyn's mind raced, connecting pieces. If you strip that northern forest, what happens to the workers who depend on steady timber? The families who rely on clean water? The long-term viability of the operation? Exactly my point, but Victoria won't listen. Then make her listen. Evelyn surprised herself with the strength in her voice. "You said you have controlling stake. Use it. Show her the numbers. Prove that conservation is more profitable than destruction." Marcus whistled. "She's got a point." "It's not that simple," Ryker said. "Why not?" "Because Victoria doesn't respond to logic. She responds to power." He started pacing. "She'll come here with lawyers and investors and political pressure. She'll make your life miserable just to prove she can. Let her try." The words came out before Evelyn could stop them. Both men stared at her. "What did you say?" Ryker asked. "I said let her try. I've survived worse than a rich woman with an attitude problem." Evelyn crossed her arms. "You married me because you thought I could handle this life. So let me handle it." Something shifted in Ryker's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "All right," he said quietly. "But when Victoria arrives, don't say I didn't warn you." The week that followed was strange and exhausting. Evelyn threw herself into learning the estate, helping Helen with household management, watching Marcus coordinate the workers, even spending time in the mill with James learning how timber got processed. She had a knack for numbers. Always had. Within 3 days, she'd identified inefficiencies in the supply chain that were costing them money. Within 5, she'd reorganized the inventory system so they could track lumber output more accurately. "You're making us look bad," Cooper grumbled one afternoon, watching her mark up a ledger. "You're welcome." "I didn't say thank you." "You were thinking it." Cooper almost smiled. "Maybe." The workers warmed to her faster than she expected. Maybe because she wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. Maybe because she asked questions instead of giving orders. Or maybe because they could tell she actually gave a damn about whether the operation succeeded. Ruth, the young maid, started following her around like a puppy. "How did you learn all this?" she asked one morning. "Survival. You learn fast when the alternative is starving. But you make it look easy." "It's not easy. I'm just stubborn." Evelyn handed her a stack of linens. "Come on. Helen needs these in the guest rooms before Victoria arrives." Victoria. The name hung over the estate like an approaching storm. She arrived on the 8th day. Evelyn was in the kitchen helping prepare lunch when Helen rushed in, face pale. "She's here. 3 carriages. Must have brought half of Denver with her." Evelyn's stomach flipped. "Where's Ryker?" "Out at the North Timberline. Won't be back for hours." "Of course he is." Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron. "Guess I'm greeting her myself." Are you sure? I could send Marcus. No, I'm the lady of the house, right? Protocol matters. Evelyn squared her shoulders. Let's get this over with. She walked to the front entrance, heart hammering. Through the windows, she could see the carriages pulling up, expensive, polished, completely out of place. The door to the first carriage opened. A woman emerged. Victoria Blackwood was tall, elegant, and absolutely terrifying. She wore black silk that probably cost more than Evelyn's entire childhood. Her dark hair was pinned perfectly. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, but it was her eyes that hit hardest. Cold, calculating, measuring Evelyn in one sweep and finding her lacking. So, Victoria said, voice like ice over stone, you're the little mountain girl who thinks she can marry into my family. Evelyn lifted her chin. I'm Evelyn Blackwood, and you must be Victoria. Mrs. Blackwood to you. Victoria climbed the porch steps like she owned them. Behind her, Richard Dalton and Bernard Hayes emerged from the other carriages, along with several people Evelyn didn't recognize. This is my estate, Evelyn said quietly. You can call me whatever you want, but I'll call you Victoria. We're family now, whether you like it or not. Victoria's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. She swept past Evelyn into the house without waiting for an invitation. The investors followed like a pack of wolves. Helen appeared at Evelyn's elbow. You all right? No, but I'm still standing. Evelyn took a breath. Let's go see what she wants. Victoria had taken over the dining room like a conquering general claiming territory. She sat at the head of the table, Ryker's seat, and surveyed the room with open disdain. This place is even more rustic than I remembered, she said to Dalton. I told Ryker 100 times to modernize. Does he listen? Of course not. Perhaps he likes it this way, Evelyn said from the doorway. Victoria's gaze snapped to her. Perhaps he doesn't know any better, but now that he has a wife, surely someone should educate him on proper living standards. The estate runs efficiently, the workers are well cared for, the operation is profitable. Evelyn entered the room. What exactly needs changing? Everything. Victoria's voice dripped contempt. Starting with Ryker's absurd resistance to expansion, which brings me to why I'm here. To pressure him into destroying the northern forest. To convince him to stop letting sentiment interfere with sound business decisions. Victoria folded her hands. The northern expansion would generate millions. It's madness to refuse it. It's madness to kill your own operation for short-term profit. Evelyn sat down across from her. Strip that forest and you destroy the watershed, cause erosion, kill the land's ability to regenerate. You might make millions now, but you'll lose everything in 10 years. Victoria's eyebrow arched. You've been here a week and think you understand timber operations? I understand survival and bad decisions that prioritize immediate gain over long-term stability. Evelyn met her eyes. Sounds like you do too, actually. So why are you pushing this? The room went silent. Victoria stared at her. Then, slowly, something like respect flickered across her face before disappearing behind ice again. Clever, Victoria said, turning my own history against me. Richard, I see why Ryker might have chosen her. She has some spine. Some spine isn't enough, Dalton said smoothly. The board needs assurances that leadership decisions aren't being influenced by inappropriate sentiment. What board? Evelyn asked. Ryker owns 51%. There is no board. There are investors, and we have rights. Rights to what? You invested capital. Ryker runs the operation. That was the deal. Evelyn leaned forward. Unless you're planning to break it. Hayes's face darkened. Careful, girl. You don't know who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Rich people used to getting their way, who can't stand that someone's telling them no. Evelyn's voice stayed level. But here's the thing. You need Ryker more than he needs you. This land is his. The operation is his. If you pull your investment, he'll find other capital. But you'll lose access to one of the most valuable timber territories in the region. Victoria studied her like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. Where did you say you were from? I didn't. Black Hollow, wasn't it? That pathetic little town barely clinging to existence? Victoria's smile was cruel. Tell me, how much did my nephew pay for you? The words hit like a physical blow. Evelyn's hands clenched under the table, nails biting into her palms. He paid my family's debts, gave them a chance to survive. Evelyn's voice shook but held. Is that what you're asking? I'm asking if you understand your place. You're not a Blackwood. You're a convenience. A tool Ryker is using to rebel against expectations. Victoria leaned back. And tools get replaced when they're no longer useful. The door slammed open. Ryker stood there, covered in sawdust and fury. Get out of my house, he said to Victoria. Ryker, darling. I said get out, now. Victoria rose smoothly. We're not finished discussing the expansion. Yes, we are. The answer is no. It's been no. It will always be no. Ryker's voice could have cut through stone. And if you ever speak to my wife like that again, I'll buy you out and kick you out of this family entirely. You don't have the capital. Try me. Victoria and Ryker stared at each other. Two wills locked in combat. Finally, Victoria smiled. We'll continue this conversation in Denver, at the governor's reception next month. I'm sure you remember it's mandatory for all major territorial landholders. Ryker's jaw tightened. Fine. Denver. But leave Evelyn out of it. Oh, I don't think so. Victoria's eyes gleamed. If she's your wife, she needs to be presented to society. Let's see how the mountain girl handles civilization. She swept out, investors trailing behind her. The carriages rolled away 20 minutes later. Evelyn sat at the table, shaking. The confrontation had taken everything she had, and now that it was over, the adrenaline was crashing. Ryker came to her side. Are you all right? No, but I will be. She looked up at him. What's the governor's reception? Formal event in Denver, politics, business, society. Everyone who matters shows up to make deals and show off. Ryker's face was grim. Victoria just set a trap. She'll use it to humiliate you publicly. Then we don't go. We have to. She's right. It's mandatory. If I don't show, I lose standing in the territory, lose credibility with officials who control lumber contracts and land rights. Evelyn's hands wouldn't stop shaking. I don't know how to be what she wants. I don't know those people or their rules. You don't need to be what she wants. You just need to be yourself. Ryker crouched beside her chair. You stood up to her today. You didn't break. That's more than most people manage. She called me a tool. She's trying to get in your head. Don't let her. His hand found hers. We'll go to Denver. We'll show them exactly who you are. And we'll make Victoria regret every word she said today. Evelyn wanted to believe him, but sitting in that enormous dining room, facing the reality of what she'd married into, she felt like she'd traded one impossible situation for another. Only this time, the wolves wore silk and smiled while they circled. The 3 weeks before Denver moved like a fever dream. Helen transformed into a drill sergeant, teaching Evelyn everything from proper table settings, to which fork went with which course, to how to navigate a ballroom without tripping over her own dress. Ruth practiced walking with books on her head until Evelyn wanted to scream, then made her do it anyway because apparently posture mattered to these people. I feel like a trained dog, Evelyn said one afternoon, balancing a book while Helen critiqued her stride. Dogs are easier to train, they don't argue. Helen circled her. Straighten your shoulders, you're slouching. I'm tired. Society ladies don't get tired. They smile through exhaustion and make it look effortless. Society ladies sound miserable. They are. But they're also powerful, and power requires sacrifice. Helen stopped in front of her. Look, I know this is awful, but Victoria's going to bring every weapon she has to that reception. You need to be ready. Evelyn dropped the book and rubbed her aching neck. What if I'm not? What if I show up and prove her right? That I'm just some mountain girl who doesn't belong? Then you prove her right. Helen's voice softened. But I don't think you will. You've got something most of those Denver women don't. What's that? You've survived real problems. They've survived bad seating arrangements at dinner parties. Helen smiled. When it matters, you'll know what to do. Evelyn wanted to believe her, but doubt sat in her chest like a stone. Ryker was gone most days, dealing with timber operations and avoiding the whole preparation circus. But at night, he'd come back to the bedroom they still shared in the strangest arrangement Evelyn had ever experienced. He took the bed, she took the chair. Neither of them acknowledged how stupid it was. Until one night when he walked in and found her trying to lace herself into one of the formal gowns Helen had insisted she practice wearing. Need help? He asked. No. Yes. Maybe. Evelyn twisted, trying to reach the laces running up her back. This is impossible. Ryker crossed the room and turned her around. His hands found the laces, pulling them tight with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. You've laced a lot of women into dresses? Evelyn asked, trying to ignore how close he was. My mother. When I was young, and my father was too drunk to help her. His voice stayed neutral. She'd get ready for social events, and I'd do the laces because she couldn't reach. It was the first time he'd mentioned his parents. Evelyn filed that information away. What happened to them? Fever took my mother when I was 15. My father drank himself to death 2 years later. Ryker finished the laces and stepped back. Victoria raised me after that. Or tried to. She failed? Depends on your definition of success. She wanted me polished and obedient. I turned out stubborn and self-sufficient. Something that might have been amusement crossed his face. She blames herself. Good. Ryker actually smiled. You're going to be fine in Denver. How do you know? Because you're still standing. Victoria hit you with everything she had, and you didn't fold. He met her eyes. That's all that matters. The rest is just theater. Theater with very high stakes. True. But you've survived worse. He headed for the door, then paused. Stop sleeping in that chair. You're going to cripple yourself. I'm fine. You're limping every morning, I've noticed. He didn't turn around. The bed's big enough for both of us. Take half of it. I won't bother you. Before Evelyn could respond, he was gone. That night, she stared at the bed for an hour before finally giving in. She took the left side as far from where Ryker usually slept as possible. The mattress was softer than anything she'd ever experienced. Her body sank into it like coming home. When Ryker came to bed later, he stayed on his side. 2 feet of space between them. Not touching. Barely breathing loud enough to hear. Thank you, Evelyn whispered into the darkness. For what? Not being what I expected. Silence. Then, what did you expect? I don't know. Someone crueler, maybe. Someone who'd use the power they had over me. I don't want power over you, Ryker said quietly. I want you beside me. That's different. Evelyn didn't know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under. She woke once in the night to find she'd drifted toward the center of the bed. Her hand was inches from Ryker's, close enough to feel his warmth but not touching. She didn't move back to her side. The day they left for Denver came too fast. Evelyn stood in front of the mirror wearing a traveling dress that probably cost more than her father's cabin and tried to recognize herself. Her hair was pinned up properly for once. The dress fit perfectly after Helen's endless alterations. She looked like someone who belonged in fine houses. She looked like a lie. Stop it, Helen said from the doorway. Stop what? Whatever you're thinking, I can see it on your face. Helen came to stand beside her. You look beautiful, and more importantly, you look capable. I look terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Helen adjusted a pin in Evelyn's hair. Remember everything we practiced. Smile when you need to. Deflect when you can. And if someone comes at you directly, don't back down. These people respect strength, not submission. What if I mess up? Then you mess up. The world won't end. Helen squeezed her shoulder. But you won't. You're tougher than all of them combined. The trip to Denver took 2 days by train, another first for Evelyn, who'd never been on anything faster than a wagon. The landscape blurred past the windows. Mountains gave way to foothills, then plains, then the sprawl of Denver rising like a promise or a threat depending on how you looked at it. Ryker sat across from her in their private compartment, reading reports and making notes. He'd been quiet since they left, tension visible in the set of his shoulders. You're nervous, Evelyn said. I hate these things. The receptions? All of it. The politics, the posturing, everyone trying to figure out who's got leverage and how to use it. He set down his papers. I'd rather face a forest fire than a ballroom full of investors. Then why go? Because if I don't play the game, I lose the ability to protect what matters. Ryker looked out the window. Territory land rights get decided at events like this. Timber contracts, railroad access, all the things that keep Iron Ridge running happen because the right people see me as legitimate. And showing up with me instead of Caroline Fletcher makes you look less legitimate. In their eyes, yes. He turned to her. But I don't care what they think. I care about what's real. And you're more real than any of them will ever be. The words settled something in Evelyn's chest. Not confidence exactly, but determination. They arrived in Denver as the sun set, painting the city gold and red. A carriage waited at the station, sent by Victoria, according to the driver. They rode through streets that made Black Hollow look like a joke. Electric lights, paved roads, buildings that stretched 3 and 4 stories high. The hotel was even more ridiculous. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, staff in uniforms who looked at Evelyn like they could smell the poverty she'd come from. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood," the concierge said smoothly. "We have your suite ready, top floor." Mrs. Victoria Blackwood insisted on the finest accommodations. "Of course she did," Ryker muttered. The suite was larger than the entire main floor of the Iron Ridge house. Separate sitting room, bedroom with a bed that could sleep 6, bathroom with actual running water, and a tub big enough to drown in. Evelyn walked through it in a daze. "This is insane. This is Victoria showing off." Ryker loosened his tie. "She wants you overwhelmed, off balance. Don't give her the satisfaction." A knock at the door interrupted them. Ryker opened it to find a hotel porter holding a large box. "Delivery for Mrs. Blackwood from Mrs. Victoria Blackwood." Ryker took the box and shut the door. He set it on the table and stepped back like it might explode. "You should open it," he said. Evelyn lifted the lid. Inside was a dress that made everything Helen had prepared look plain. Deep blue silk with silver threading that caught the light. Delicate lace at the sleeves and neckline. Cut in the latest fashion with a fitted bodice and full skirt. It was beautiful. It was also a message. "She's saying the clothes I brought aren't good enough," Evelyn said. "She's saying she still controls the narrative." Ryker's voice went hard. "You don't have to wear it." Evelyn touched the silk. It felt like water under her fingers. "What if it actually is better than what I brought?" "Then Victoria wins this round. But it's one round, not the fight." Evelyn thought about that, about pride versus practicality, about choosing battles that mattered. "I'm wearing it," she decided, but not because she sent it, because it's gorgeous and I deserve to feel gorgeous at least once. Ryker's expression softened. "Fair enough." The reception was the following evening. Evelyn spent the day trying not to think about it, which meant she thought about nothing else. She took a bath in the enormous tub, let Ruth, who'd insisted on coming to Denver to help, fuss over her hair for 2 hours, stepped into Victoria's dress, and hated how perfectly it fit. "You look like a queen," Ruth breathed. "I look like I'm playing pretend." "Same thing, really. Queens are just better at pretending." Ruth secured the last pin in Evelyn's elaborate hairstyle. "There, perfect." Evelyn studied herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked nothing like the girl who'd chopped wood and scrubbed floors in Black Hollow. This woman looked polished, refined, completely foreign. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "You can." Ruth's voice was fierce. "You stood up to Mrs. Victoria in her own house. A bunch of fancy people in a ballroom can't be worse than that." Evelyn wanted to believe her. Ryker appeared in the doorway wearing formal evening clothes that made him look like someone Victoria would approve of. His hair was combed back, his jaw was clean-shaven. He looked every inch the wealthy landowner. "Ready?" he asked. "No." "Good. Neither am I." He offered his arm. "Let's go anyway." The governor's mansion blazed with light. Carriages lined the circular drive, depositing people in evening wear who looked like they'd been born attending events like this. Music drifted from inside, actual orchestra, not the fiddle players Evelyn was used to. Ryker helped her down from their carriage. Her hand shook in his. "Breathe," he said quietly. "Just breathe." They climbed the steps, entered a foyer that made the hotel suite look modest. A servant took their coats. Another directed them toward the ballroom. And then they were inside. The ballroom was massive, easily 200 people scattered across polished floors, gathering near tables laden with food Evelyn couldn't name, holding crystal glasses filled with champagne that caught the chandelier light. Women in silk and jewels, men in tailored suits, everyone looking like they belonged. Conversations died as Evelyn and Ryker entered. Heads turned, whispers started like wildfire. Victoria materialized from the crowd like a shark smelling blood. She wore black again, this time with rubies at her throat. Dalton and Hayes flanked her like attack dogs. "Ryker, Evelyn." Victoria's smile could have frozen water. "So glad you could make it. And I see you wore my gift. How thoughtful." "It's a beautiful dress," Evelyn said evenly. Thank you. Yes, well, I thought it might help you look less rustic. Victoria's eyes swept over her, though I'm not sure anything could completely erase where you came from. People nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. They were watching openly now, waiting to see how this played out. Where I came from taught me to survive, Evelyn said. That's more than most people here can say. Victoria's smile sharpened. Survival and sophistication are very different things, dear. Come, let me introduce you to people who matter. She took Evelyn's arm, not gently, and steered her away from Ryker before either of them could protest. Dalton and Hayes moved to intercept Ryker, pulling him toward a group of men near the bar. They were separating them, deliberately. Victoria led Evelyn through the crowd like a general showing off a captured enemy. This is Evelyn Blackwood, Ryker's new wife, from Black Hollow. Perhaps you've heard of it? No, I'm not surprised. It's barely a settlement. The women Victoria introduced her to smiled with their mouths and judged with their eyes. They asked questions designed to expose Evelyn's ignorance about fashion, about society, about people and places she'd never heard of. And what does your father do? One woman asked, dripping false sweetness. He's dying of tuberculosis, Evelyn said bluntly. Before that, he worked timber and broke horses. Uncomfortable silence. How quaint, another woman managed. It's honest work, Evelyn said. More honest than most of what happens in this room. Victoria's grip on her arm tightened. Evelyn has such a refreshing directness. Clearly, she hasn't learned proper social graces yet. Clearly. A tall woman in emerald silk appeared beside them. She was beautiful in that calculated way that spoke of money and maintenance. Though I suppose that's what happens when one marries so far above one's station. Caroline, Victoria's voice warmed. How lovely to see you. Evelyn, this is Caroline Fletcher. Her father owns the Western Railroad Company. Of course. The woman Ryker was supposed to marry. Caroline looked Evelyn up and down like livestock at auction. So, you're the reason Ryker rejected a perfectly advantageous alliance. I can't imagine what he sees in you. Maybe he got tired of people who only see him as an alliance, Evelyn said. Or maybe he had a momentary lapse in judgment. Caroline's smile was poison. But those can be corrected, eventually. The meaning was clear. This marriage was temporary in Caroline's mind, a mistake that would be undone. I should return to the party, Caroline said to Victoria, ignoring Evelyn completely. But do let me know when Ryker comes to his senses. Father's offer still stands. She glided away, leaving Evelyn feeling like she'd been stepped on. That's your competition, Victoria said quietly. Beautiful, connected, sophisticated. Everything you're not. She's also cruel, calculating, empty. Evelyn pulled her arm free. Everything I hope I never become. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Careful, girl. You're in my world now. I can make you look foolish with a single word. Then do it. Evelyn's voice stayed level despite her racing heart. But understand that if you come after me, you're also coming after Ryker. And he's the only thing keeping your investment in that timber operation relevant. You think you have leverage? I think I understand how this works better than you give me credit for. Evelyn met her eyes. You need Ryker. He controls the land, the operation, the workers. Without him, you're just money, and money alone doesn't cut down trees. Victoria stared at her. Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or grudging respect. You're smarter than you look, she finally said. You keep underestimating me. That's a mistake. Before Victoria could respond, a voice cut through the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. The governor stood at the front of the ballroom. Older man, silver hair, presence that commanded the room. Thank you all for attending tonight. As many of you know, we're here to discuss the future development of our territory. Evelyn's stomach sank. This was it, the trap Victoria had been setting. One matter of particular importance is the northern forest expansion proposed by the Blackwood Timber Company. The governor gestured toward Victoria. Mrs. Blackwood has presented compelling arguments for the economic benefits such expansion would bring. Victoria smiled like a cat with cream. However, the governor continued, there are concerns about environmental impact, about sustainability, about the long-term effects on our territory's natural resources. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I'd like to hear from both sides of this issue. The governor's eyes found Ryker. Mr. Blackwood, perhaps you'd like to present your position? Ryker moved forward, looking calm despite being ambushed. Thank you, Governor. My position is straightforward. The northern expansion would generate short-term profit while causing long-term devastation. That's a matter of opinion, Victoria interjected smoothly. The economic analysis clearly shows. The economic analysis ignores ecological reality, Ryker cut in. Strip that forest and you destroy the watershed for 3 valleys, cause erosion that will take 50 years to recover from. Kill the land's ability to sustain timber operations long term. Sentiment, Dalton said from the crowd. Not facts. Facts. Ryker's voice hardened. I have survey reports, soil studies, hydrology assessments, all showing that aggressive logging in that region would be catastrophic. Reports can be interpreted many ways, Victoria said. And in business, sometimes difficult decisions are necessary for growth. The crowd was watching like this was theater, some nodding at Victoria's words, others looking thoughtful at Ryker's. Evelyn saw it happening, saw Victoria winning the room through charm and confidence and the promise of wealth. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. May I say something? Every eye in the ballroom turned to her. The poor mountain girl, the unsuitable wife, the woman who didn't belong. Mrs. Blackwood, the governor said carefully, this is a business discussion. I understand, but I have perspective that might be valuable. Evelyn's voice shook but held. I grew up in Black Hollow, a frontier town that depends on timber, on clean water, on the land staying healthy enough to support life. How touching, Caroline murmured from somewhere in the crowd. Evelyn ignored her. I've seen what happens when companies prioritize profit over sustainability. I've watched land get stripped bare and families starve when the resources they depend on disappear. I've lived in poverty caused by short-sighted decisions made by people who never have to suffer the consequences. Victoria's expression darkened. This is hardly... I'm not finished. Evelyn turned to face the governor directly. The northern expansion Mrs. Blackwood is pushing would make a lot of money for investors in Denver, but the workers at Iron Ridge, the families in the valleys below, the people who actually live on that land, they'd pay the price when the rivers dry up and the soil washes away and the timber stops growing back. Business requires risk, Hayes said. Risk for who? Evelyn shot back. Not for you. You'll take your profit and move on to the next opportunity. But the people who live there will be stuck cleaning up the mess you leave behind. The ballroom had gone silent. Even the orchestra had stopped playing. You're advocating for sentiment over progress, Victoria said coldly. I'm advocating for intelligence over greed. Evelyn's hands clenched at her sides. There's a difference between progress and destruction, between growth and exploitation. My husband understands that. The question is whether you do. Victoria's face went hard. You're out of line. No, I'm telling the truth. Evelyn looked around the ballroom at all the polished, powerful people. None of you have to worry about where your next meal comes from, about whether the water you drink is clean, about whether the land you depend on will still be viable in 10 years. But the people you're making decisions for do worry about those things, every single day. This is absurd, Dalton said. We're discussing business policy, not charity work. Business policy that affects real people. Or does that not matter to you? The governor studied Evelyn with new interest. Mrs. Blackwood raises valid points about community impact. Points made from emotion, not expertise, Victoria countered. Points made from experience, Evelyn corrected. I've lived the consequences of bad environmental decisions. That's expertise most people in this room will never have. The governor nodded slowly. I think this discussion deserves more consideration than a ballroom debate can provide. Mrs. Blackwood, Victoria, I'd like to review your expansion proposal more thoroughly, along with Mr. Blackwood's environmental assessments, and I'd like Mrs. Evelyn Blackwood to provide testimony about community impact. Victoria's eyes went wide. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. Territory development should balance economic growth with environmental protection. The governor smiled at Evelyn. Thank you for your perspective, Mrs. Blackwood. It's refreshing to hear from someone who understands these issues from ground level. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Victoria looked like she'd been struck. Caroline's face had gone pale with rage. Ryker appeared at Evelyn's side. His hand found hers. Well done, he murmured. Evelyn's legs felt like water. She'd just challenged Victoria Blackwood in front of the territory's most powerful people. had just positioned herself as an obstacle to the expansion instead of a pawn to be moved around. She'd either saved the Northern Forest or signed her own death warrant. Probably both. Victoria cut through the crowd like a blade. "This isn't over." "No," Evelyn said quietly. "It's not. But you don't get to dismiss me anymore." "We'll see about that." Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper. "You think one speech makes you legitimate? You're still the desperate mountain girl who sold herself for survival. And when Ryker gets tired of your rustic charm, you'll be right back where you started." "Maybe. But at least I'll know I fought for something that mattered." Evelyn met her eyes. "Can you say the same?" Victoria's hand twitched like she wanted to slap her. Instead, she turned and walked away, Dalton and Hayes scrambling to follow. Ryker squeezed Evelyn's hand. "You just made an enemy of the most dangerous woman in Denver." "I know. She'll come after you, after us. She won't stop until she wins or we're destroyed." "I know that too." Evelyn took a shaky breath. "But someone had to say it. Someone had to point out that profit isn't everything. You realize you just volunteered to testify before the territorial government?" "Apparently." Evelyn laughed, high and a little hysterical. "I don't even know what that means." "It means you give formal testimony about how the expansion would affect communities, with lawyers and politicians and people trying to tear apart everything you say." "Wonderful. Can't wait." Despite everything, Ryker smiled. "You were magnificent." "I was terrified." "That too, but you did it anyway." He pulled her closer. "Come on, let's get out of here before Victoria regroups." They left the ballroom, ignoring the stares and whispers, made it back to their suite, and shut the door on the whole circus. Evelyn collapsed into a chair, shaking from head to toe. "What did I just do?" "You stood up to Victoria, in public, in front of everyone who matters." Ryker poured her a glass of water from the pitcher on the table. "You also probably saved the Northern Forest, or destroyed your business relationships forever." "Worth it." He handed her the water. "You meant what you said, about sustainability mattering more than profit." "Of course I did." "Then we fight for it. Together." Ryker crouched in front of her chair. "Victoria is going to come at us hard. She'll use every connection, every piece of leverage she has. It's going to get worse before it gets better." "I know." "And you're still willing to fight?" Evelyn thought about the Northern Forest, about the workers at Iron Ridge, about Sarah and Thomas and her father and everyone else who'd been crushed by people who saw them as resources instead of human beings. "Yes," she said. "I'm willing to fight." Ryker's hand covered hers. "Then we'll win, somehow." Evelyn wanted to believe him, but sitting in that expensive suite, wearing Victoria's dress, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just started a war she had no idea how to finish. The war started 3 days after the reception. Victoria didn't waste time with subtlety. She went straight for blood. The first attack came through the newspapers. Denver's Morning Edition ran a front-page story about Evelyn's background, how she'd been destitute in Black Hollow, how Ryker had paid her family's debts, how the marriage was clearly a transaction rather than a love match. The article stopped just short of calling her a prostitute, but the implication sat there like rotting meat. Mountain girl marries timber. Barren. Love or desperation, the headline screamed. Evelyn read it over breakfast in their hotel suite, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. Every ugly detail was there. Her father's illness, the debt collectors, even the exact amount Ryker had paid. Someone had talked. Someone from Black Hollow had sold her story for whatever Victoria was willing to pay. "Don't read it," Ryker said, taking the paper from her hands. "Too late," Evelyn's voice came out hollow. "Everyone in Denver has already read it. Everyone at that reception. Everyone who matters." "They don't matter." "Yes, they do. You said so yourself. These people control land rights, timber contracts, everything that keeps Iron Ridge running." She stood pacing the suite. "Victoria just made me a liability. A scandal. Every business connection you have is going to question your judgment now." Ryker crumpled the newspaper. "Let them question. I know what's real." Reality doesn't matter when reputation does the killing. Evelyn stopped at the window, staring down at Denver's streets. "She's going to destroy me. And through me, she'll destroy you." "Not if we fight back." "How?" "I can't undo where I came from. I can't change the fact that I married you for money. The admission hurt to say out loud. She's telling the truth, Ryker. That's what makes it so effective. She's telling one version of the truth. There are others. Ryker came to stand beside her. You married me for money? Yes. But you also saved your family, showed courage most people don't have, made hard choices in an impossible situation. That's not shameful. That's survival. Try explaining that to the people reading that article. I will, today. Before Evelyn could ask what he meant, Ryker was already moving. He called for his coat, for a carriage, for Marcus, who'd been waiting downstairs. Within 20 minutes, they were heading to the Denver Chronicle offices. What are we doing? Evelyn asked as the carriage rattled through traffic. Controlling the narrative. Victoria got the first word. Now we get the second. Ryker's jaw was set, and it's going to hit a lot harder than hers did. The Chronicle's editor was a weathered man named Thompson, who looked like he'd spent 40 years chain-smoking and fighting deadlines. He studied Ryker with open skepticism when they barged into his office. Mr. Blackwood, to what do I owe the pleasure? You ran Victoria Blackwood's hit piece on my wife this morning. We ran news. There's a difference. You ran gossip designed to damage her reputation. Ryker dropped a thick envelope on Thompson's desk. Here's actual news. Financial records showing the Blackwood Timber Company's environmental initiatives. Worker testimony about improved conditions at Iron Ridge. Letters from frontier families whose lives improved because of sustainable logging practices. Thompson opened the envelope, scanning the contents. His eyebrows climbed. This is substantial. It's also true, which is more than Victoria's article can claim. Ryker leaned forward. You want a real story? Here it is. Wealthy investors trying to force environmental destruction for profit, while the people who actually work the land fight to protect it. My wife isn't a scandal. She's the voice of everyone those investors want to silence. Thompson studied Evelyn. Is that how you see it, Mrs. Blackwood? Evelyn's throat felt tight, but she met his eyes. I see people like Victoria making decisions that affect communities they'll never have to live in. I see profit being prioritized over survival. And yes, I married for money, because that's what poverty forces you to do. But I'm using this position to fight for something bigger than myself. If that's scandalous, so be it. Silence. Thompson tapped his pen against the desk. I'll run it, he finally said. Front page, tomorrow's edition. But I want an exclusive interview with both of you. Your full story. No holding back. Done, Ryker said immediately. They spent 3 hours in Thompson's office, laying out everything. Evelyn talked about Black Hollow, about watching her family starve, about the impossible choice she'd made. Ryker explained his fight against the northern expansion, the environmental surveys, the long-term consequences of strip logging. Thompson took notes the entire time, his expression unreadable. This is going to make waves, he said when they finished. Victoria won't take it well. Good, Evelyn said. The article ran the next morning. Timber Baron and Mountain Bride fight corporate greed dominated the front page, accompanied by a detailed breakdown of the environmental stakes and Evelyn's testimony about frontier poverty. The response was immediate and explosive. Some newspapers picked up the story, running their own pieces about sustainable logging and corporate responsibility. Others doubled down on Victoria's narrative, calling Evelyn an opportunist using environmental rhetoric to hide her gold digging. The territory split into camps. Some people saw Evelyn as a hero. Others saw her as a fraud. Victoria saw her as a target. The second attack came through the investors. Hayes and Dalton called an emergency board meeting, technically legal since they held combined investment stake of 40%. They couldn't outvote Ryker, but they could make noise. The meeting happened in a Denver hotel conference room that smelled like cigar smoke and old grudges. Victoria sat at the head of the table like a queen holding court. Hayes and Dalton flanked her. 3 other investors Evelyn didn't recognize filled out the rest. Ryker and Evelyn sat on the opposite side. Outnumbered, outmatched in experience, but not outgunned. This meeting is about the future of the Blackwood Timber Company, Victoria began without preamble. Specifically about leadership decisions that are damaging the company's reputation and profitability. Get to the point, Ryker said. The point is that your personal choices are affecting business. The northern expansion could generate millions. You're blocking it based on sentiment and environmental concerns that have no basis in sound economics. Victoria's voice went cold. And now you've dragged the company into a public relations nightmare with your wife's colorful background. My background isn't the issue, Evelyn said. The environmental impact of the expansion is. You're not qualified to make that assessment. I'm qualified to understand consequences, which is more than I can say for people who've never had to live with the results of their decisions. Hayes slammed his hand on the table. This is exactly the problem. She's out of control, making public statements that contradict company interests, undermining our credibility with investors. Actually, Marcus said from his seat beside Ryker, public response to the Chronicle article has been positive. We've had 3 new investment inquiries from companies interested in sustainable logging operations. Victoria's eyes narrowed. That's irrelevant. It's directly relevant. It shows there's a market for environmental responsibility. Marcus slid papers across the table. These are preliminary contracts, worth about $2 million combined, all contingent on us maintaining our current conservation practices. Silence. The investors picked up the papers, reading. $2 million, Dalton repeated slowly. Versus the $5 million the northern expansion would generate, Victoria countered. Over 1 year, Ryker said. Then nothing, because you'd have destroyed the land's ability to regenerate. These sustainable contracts, they're renewable, annual, worth $10 million over 5 years if we play it right. If, Victoria stressed, that's speculation. So is your expansion profit. You're assuming demand stays high, that you can process the timber fast enough, that you don't cause environmental disasters that trigger territorial lawsuits. Ryker met her eyes. I'm offering guaranteed income with managed risk. You're gambling on short-term extraction. The other investors were paying attention now. Numbers spoke louder than sentiment. There's another issue, Dalton said. The governor's request for Mrs. Blackwood to testify about community impact. That creates legal complications. What complications? Evelyn asked. Your testimony could be used to block the expansion permanently, not just delay it, kill it entirely. Dalton's voice hardened. We can't allow that. You can't stop it. The governor requested it. We can make it very difficult for you to comply. Victoria's smile was sharp. Immigration questions about your marriage legitimacy. Financial audits of the transactions between Ryker and your family. We have lawyers who specialize in making people's lives miserable. Threats, Ryker said flatly. That's what we're down to now. Incentives, Victoria corrected. Drop the testimony, support the expansion, and we'll make sure no one questions your marriage or your wife's past transactions. And if we refuse, then we pursue every legal avenue available. We tie you up in court for years. We freeze company assets during litigation. We make Iron Ridge so expensive to maintain that you'll be forced to sell. Victoria leaned forward. I built this company from nothing. I will not let you destroy it with misguided environmental crusading. Evelyn's hands clenched under the table. This was the moment. The knife at the throat. Victoria was offering a way out, abandon the fight, accept the expansion, keep the peace. All it would cost was everything Evelyn believed in. No, she said. Everyone turned to look at her. No? Victoria repeated. No. I won't drop the testimony. I won't support the expansion, and I won't be bullied into silence by people who see me as collateral damage. Evelyn stood. You want to question my marriage? Go ahead. Audit the transactions? Fine. Tie us up in court? We'll fight every step. You're making a mistake, Dalton warned. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Evelyn looked at Victoria. You think I'm afraid of poverty? I've lived it. You think I'm scared of losing everything? I've already lost everything and survived. What you're threatening me with is just Tuesday for people like me. Brave words, Victoria said. Let's see if you still feel that way when reality hits. I've been hit by reality my entire life. I'm still standing. Evelyn grabbed her coat. Ryker, are we done here? Ryker stood, something like pride in his eyes. We're done. They walked out of the meeting, leaving Victoria and her investors staring after them. In the hallway, Evelyn's legs nearly gave out. Marcus caught her elbow. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen, he said. Probably both. Evelyn leaned against the wall, shaking. Did I just destroy everything? No, Ryker said. You just refused to be destroyed. There's a difference. The third attack came through the courts. Victoria filed a lawsuit challenging the marriage's legitimacy, claiming Ryker had been coerced or defrauded into the arrangement. It was nonsense legally, but it was effective publicity. Every newspaper ran stories about the questionable union and marriage under investigation. Simultaneously, Hayes and Dalton launched a financial audit of Iron Ridge, looking for any irregularity they could exploit. And Caroline Fletcher's father started making noise about railroad access to Blackwood timber, threatening to cut off shipping routes if the expansion didn't proceed. It was coordinated, vicious, designed to strangle them from multiple directions at once. "They're going to bleed us dry," Marcus said one night, reviewing legal bills that kept climbing. "Even if we win every case, the cost of fighting will cripple us." "Then we don't fight their way," Evelyn said. "What? We're playing defense, reacting to everything they throw at us. We need to go on offense." Evelyn grabbed paper and started writing. The governor asked for testimony about community impact. Let's give him more than testimony. Let's give him proof. Over the next 2 weeks, Evelyn threw herself into research with the intensity of someone who had nothing left to lose. She contacted frontier towns affected by aggressive logging, gathered statements from families whose water sources had been destroyed, documented ecological disasters caused by strip mining timber operations in other territories. She compiled everything into a report that was part environmental assessment, part human rights documentation. Names, faces, stories of people whose lives had been destroyed by exactly what Victoria was proposing. "This is powerful," Thompson said when she showed him a draft. "Can I run excerpts?" "Run all of it. I want people to see what's really at stake." The Chronicle published the report in installments over a week. Each day brought new testimony from frontier communities, new evidence of environmental destruction, new proof that what Victoria called sound economics was actually catastrophic decision-making. Public opinion began to shift. Letters to the governor started pouring in from citizens demanding environmental protections. Frontier communities organized to oppose the expansion. Even some investors started pulling back, worried about the public relations nightmare. Victoria's coalition began to fracture. The testimony before the territorial government happened on a cold morning in late November. The chamber was packed. Investors, politicians, journalists, citizens who'd traveled from across the territory to watch. Victoria sat on one side with her lawyers. Ryker and Evelyn sat on the other with Marcus and a single attorney they'd scraped together funds to hire. The governor presided, looking grave. "We're here to determine whether the proposed northern expansion should proceed. Mrs. Evelyn Blackwood, you've been asked to provide testimony about community impact. Please proceed." Evelyn stood. Her legs shook but held. "Members of the territorial government, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Evelyn Blackwood. I come from Black Hollow, a frontier town that exists because the land around it can sustain life. Clean water, stable soil, forest that regenerates." She looked around the chamber. The northern expansion would destroy all of that for 3 valleys. Not might. Would. We have proof from other territories where similar operations caused catastrophic damage. Victoria's lawyer stood. "Objection. Mrs. Blackwood is not a qualified environmental expert." "I'm an expert in survival," Evelyn shot back. "I've lived the consequences of bad land management. I've watched communities die because people in power made short-sighted decisions prioritizing profit over sustainability." The governor nodded. "Continue, Mrs. Blackwood." Evelyn spent the next hour walking through the report. She showed photographs of destroyed watersheds, read testimony from families displaced by environmental disasters, presented soil surveys proving the northern forest's fragility, and then she told her own story. "I married Ryker Blackwood because my family was starving, because debt collectors were going to tear us apart, because I had no other options." Her voice cracked but didn't break. "People like Victoria Blackwood call that desperation. I call it reality for thousands of frontier families." She looked directly at Victoria. "The expansion you're proposing would create that same desperation for hundreds more families. It would destroy their water sources, their land, their ability to survive. And when they're forced to make the same impossible choices I made, you'll call them opportunists and gold diggers too." "This is emotional manipulation," Victoria's lawyer protested. "This is truth," Evelyn said. "The expansion is about profit for investors who will never have to live with the consequences. The people who will suffer are the ones with no voice in this room. I'm trying to give them one." The chamber erupted in applause. The governor had to call for order. Victoria stood. May I respond? Please. Mrs. Blackwood tells a compelling story. But stories don't pay workers wages. They don't fund schools or infrastructure or territorial development. Victoria's voice was smooth, practiced. The expansion represents millions in economic growth, jobs, tax revenue, progress. At what cost? Evelyn challenged. At the cost of making hard decisions. Progress requires sacrifice. Sacrifice from who? Not from you. You live in Denver. You'll profit and leave. The sacrifice comes from people who have no choice. Evelyn's hands clenched. That's not progress. That's exploitation. You're a child playing at understanding business. I understand that business decisions affect real people. Something you've apparently forgotten. The governor raised his hand. That's enough. We'll adjourn for deliberation. The waiting was agony. 3 hours in a side room while the territorial government debated. Evelyn paced. Ryker sat still as stone. Marcus kept checking his pocket watch like he could speed time up through sheer will. Finally, they were called back. The chamber was silent. The governor stood. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, we've reached a decision. The northern expansion as proposed is denied. Victoria's face went white. Dalton started to object, but the governor continued. However, we recognize the economic benefits of timber operations. We're proposing a compromise. Limited, sustainable logging in designated areas with strict environmental oversight. Annual reviews. Mandatory regeneration programs. The governor looked at Ryker. Mr. Blackwood, you'll oversee implementation. Mrs. Blackwood, you'll serve on the oversight committee as community representative. Evelyn's ears rang. They'd won. Not completely. Victoria still had investment stake. The logging would still happen. But they'd stopped the catastrophic expansion, protected the watershed, given communities a voice. Victoria stood abruptly and walked out, her lawyers scrambling to follow. Outside the chamber, reporters swarmed. Evelyn answered questions in a daze, barely aware of what she was saying. Something about environmental protection, community rights, the importance of sustainable development. Ryker pulled her away finally, leading her to their carriage. We did it, he said once they were alone. Did we? Victoria still hates us. The investors are furious. We've made enemies across the territory. Yes, but we also saved the forest, protected the communities, proved that profit isn't the only thing that matters. Ryker took her hand. That's worth the cost. Evelyn looked at him, really looked, saw the man who'd shown up at her door in Black Hollow offering an impossible bargain, who'd turned out to be someone far more complex and decent than she'd imagined. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For giving me the chance to fight. For not asking me to be something I'm not. She squeezed his hand. For choosing me when you could have had anyone. I chose you because you're exactly who you are. That hasn't changed. Something shifted in Evelyn's chest. Not quite love. She wasn't ready to name it that yet. But something close. Something real. The aftermath unfolded slowly. Victoria made one final attempt to undermine them, pushing for a vote of no confidence. But with the governor's support and new sustainable contracts coming in, the other investors refused to back her. Within a month, she'd sold her shares to Ryker at a loss and withdrawn from the company entirely. The last time Evelyn saw her, Victoria was boarding a train to California. Their eyes met across the platform. No words, just mutual recognition of a war fought and finished. Hayes and Dalton followed Victoria out, taking their capital with them. But new investors arrived. People interested in sustainable forestry, in long-term planning, in operations that didn't destroy the land they depended on. Iron Ridge thrived. Caroline Fletcher married a railroad executive 6 months later. The wedding made all the society pages. Evelyn sent her congratulations and meant it. Caroline belonged in that world. Evelyn never would, and she'd stop pretending otherwise. Winter gave way to spring. Evelyn spent her days working with the Oversight Committee, visiting frontier towns, documenting environmental impacts. She became known across the territory, not as Ryker Blackwood's wife, but as someone who fought for communities that had no other voice. Ruth got promoted to household manager when Helen retired to live with her sister in Denver. Marcus took over more of the timber operations, freeing Ryker to focus on expansion into sustainable practices. And one afternoon in early summer, A letter arrived from Black Hollow. Evelyn opened it with shaking hands. Her father had died, peacefully, in his sleep, with Sarah and Thomas beside him. The doctor had made him comfortable. He'd lasted longer than anyone expected. The letter was from Sarah. Her handwriting had improved. "He talked about you every day," Sarah wrote. "Said you'd done something amazing, that you'd taken an impossible situation and turned it into something good. He was proud, Evie. So proud." Evelyn sat on the porch of Iron Ridge and cried. Not from grief exactly. Her father's death had been coming for so long it felt more like an ending than a surprise. But from the weight of everything that had happened since she'd climbed into Ryker's wagon and left Black Hollow behind. Ryker found her there an hour later. He sat beside her, not speaking, just present. "My father died," Evelyn said finally. "I'm sorry." "He got to see his children safe, got real medical care at the end, died with dignity instead of drowning in debt." She wiped her eyes. "That's because of you. That's because you made a hard choice." "We both did." They sat in silence as the sun set over the mountains. The estate sprawled below them, workers heading home, smoke from chimneys, the sound of the mill winding down for the evening. "Do you ever regret it?" Evelyn asked, "choosing me instead of someone like Caroline?" Ryker was quiet for a long moment. "No. Caroline would have been easier in some ways, less complicated. But she never would have fought the way you did, never would have stood up to Victoria or challenged the expansion or cared about anything beyond appearances. I'm still not what people expected." "Good. I don't want what people expect. I want what's real." He turned to look at her. "And you're the most real thing I've ever known." Evelyn studied his face, saw past the hard exterior to the man underneath, someone who'd been alone for too long, who'd built walls to protect himself and then met someone stubborn enough to kick them down. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she said. Not planned, just true. Riker's eyes widened. "You think?" "I'm still figuring it out, but yes, I think so." She smiled. "Is that okay?" "It's better than okay." His hand found hers. "Because I've been in love with you since you threw that book at my head in the bedroom and told me to stop being an ass about sleeping arrangements." "I didn't throw a book at you. You threatened to. Close enough." Evelyn laughed. Actually laughed, and it felt like coming home. They sat there as night fell, two people who'd made impossible bargains and somehow found something real in the wreckage. The years that followed weren't easy. There were still battles with investors who wanted faster returns. Still conflicts with communities who didn't trust outsiders. Still moments when Evelyn wondered if she'd made the right choice. But she'd learned something crucial. Survival wasn't just about not dying. It was about building something worth living for. Iron Ridge became a model for sustainable forestry. Other operations copied their practices. The northern forest regenerated under careful management. Frontier communities thrived instead of being exploited. Sarah and Thomas came to live with them after their father died. Sarah grew into a sharp young woman who eventually took over the estate's accounting. Thomas became a surveyor, mapping territory and identifying sustainable harvest areas. Evelyn never forgot where she came from. She kept the blue ribbon Sarah had given her, worn and faded, in a drawer by her bed. Kept her mother's locket around her neck. Kept the memory of Black Hollow as a reminder of what poverty looked like and why fighting against it mattered. She and Ryker built a life that wasn't perfect. They argued, disagreed, had moments where the weight of running an empire felt crushing, but they built it together, and that made all the difference. 10 years after that desperate night in Black Hollow, Evelyn stood on the porch of Iron Ridge watching snow fall. Ryker came to stand beside her, gray in his hair now, lines around his eyes from years of hard work and harder decisions. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't shown up that night?" he asked. Evelyn thought about it, about the debt collectors, about Sarah and Thomas being torn apart, about her father dying alone and unmourned. We'd have lost everything, but we didn't, because you took a chance on a desperate girl who had nothing to offer but stubbornness and survival instincts. Best decision I ever made, even when I'm difficult, especially then. Ryker pulled her close. "You know what I learned from all this?" "What?" "Power isn't about money or land or controlling people. It's about choosing to fight for something bigger than yourself." His voice softened. "You taught me that." Evelyn leaned into him, watching snow cover the mountains in white. Somewhere in the valley below, families were settling in for winter. Workers were heading home to warm houses. Children were growing up with clean water and stable ground beneath their feet. All because one desperate girl refused to accept that poverty was destiny. Because one stubborn man chose partnership over control. Because two people made impossible bargains and then worked like hell to turn them into something real. The world hadn't changed. Rich people still exploited the poor. Companies still prioritized profit over people. Injustice still existed in 1,000 different forms. But in their corner of the territory, in their piece of the wilderness, things were different, better. Proof that fighting back mattered even when the odds looked impossible. Evelyn touched the blue ribbon around her wrist. Still there after all these years. "I hope Sarah and Thomas remember this," she said quietly. "That they came from nothing and built something anyway. That survival isn't enough. You have to fight for the right to thrive. They'll remember. You made sure of it." Ryker kissed the top of her head. "Come on, dinner's getting cold." They went inside, leaving the snow to fall and the mountains to keep their secrets. The desperate bargain made a decade ago had become something neither of them expected. Not just survival, but a life worth fighting for. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered.